Hello and welcome everybody to our today's virtual meeting of the US Vivit user groups. Today our session is around discover the next generation of shift everywhere testing with AI. Yeah, so welcome from our side from Vivit. So we are here today and we would like to discuss our point of view around shift culture that is permeating the software testing industry. My name is Iris Börs. I'm located in Europe, in Germany, and I normally will be the liaison for the SIX and LUX in Europe. And today it's an honor for me to host this meeting of the US user groups. So if you have a friend and maybe you know someone who is not already a member of Vivit, then you can take a look to the Vivit website. I also would like to thank Microfocus for being the sponsor of today's LUC meeting, and I think we will have great content being prepared. We have a great speaker and also a great moderator. Our today's speaker is Don Jackson. Don, he is a chief technologist, ADM at Microfocus. I can say he is a really experienced guy. So we will have an expert today here who is sharing his point of view about shifting everywhere within the testing. So he started, maybe we go back, and I would like to honor you a little bit more, Don, to say, hey, you are really experienced. You have more than 20 years experience within the application delivery management. You started your career at ABN AMRO. You hold the role of a test automation engineer and performance engineer and testing architect for more than 13 years before you joining Microfocus now for almost 7 years. Currently, you are working as a chief technologist for ADM in Microfocus. So I think if we will have someone here who can answer all the questions around testing with AI, I think you are the man. Yeah, and we will also have Chris Trimper here, and Chris, he is holding a dual job today. At the one hand, he is the director education chair for Vivit, so he is the host of Vivit for Vivit today, and also you are a customer and an end user, and so you are also someone who can really ask the questions, and you can show maybe the challenges the customers are facing when we talk about shifting everywhere. Chris, you have been also really experienced working for more than 10 years at Independent Health as a QR department and automation architect. Your role is to continually add efficiencies to the testing process and for the team. And so I think you are the best person to give feedback to Microfocus, to the ones who are developing the software. You have been in the software testing for, well, now over 18 years. So I think you are a really good counterpart to Don. And you are really experienced within the Microfocus product portfolio of testing tools. And from a Vivit perspective, I think, yeah, you are really experienced in the community. You have been a LUC leader, and you joined the board for more than 5 years. So I think we have you also here as a host, which is experienced, and you can ask the right questions. Before we start, maybe some regulations how to use the control panel. So at the moment, everybody is muted, but you certainly can type in your questions if you will have some into the question panel. Ask your questions and add your comments, whatever you would like to get being answered or being asked. we will take this, and Chris is taking this and asking this to Don, and so you can be sure that there is no open questions at the end of our webinar. I hope so. And regarding the maybe pre-asked questions you put into the registration field, I guess we will have this covered already with the presentation, and you ask the right questions, and if there is still something you would like to get to know, type it in, and we will take it from there and ask it and try to solve it. Yeah, so before, maybe one thing you should be sure, this webinar will be recorded. You definitely will get the link to the recorded version so that you can take a look on demand one more time, and this is done. You will get a separate email after within 48 hours after this webinar, and you can be sure you don't miss it. So before we start, there is one more thing. Yeah, we will conclude with a chance to win some Coffee on Us gift cards. To qualify for the raffle, you have to fill in a short survey, which is popping up directly after the closing of today's session. Please be aware, we need a valid business email, otherwise you can't take part in this raffle. Yeah, and now this is it from my side, and I'm happy to hand it over now to you, Chris, and to you, Don.
Thanks, Iris.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So, so the way that we're going to handle this, guys, is Chris and I are going to co-present this. I'm kind of going to be your play-by-play announcer, and we'll let Chris do some color commentary about where he's seen these type of things in his experience as a customer and as a practitioner as well. So welcome to the session around our point of view around the shift culture in the software testing industry, like what Iris said. As she said, I'm Don Jackson, Chief Technologist with Microfocus in our application delivery management, and I'll be leading the discussion primarily. You may have heard of shift left or shift right being essential to successfully preventing defect slippage in today's application development landscape. In fact, in the 2021-2022 World Quality Report, it was cited that 55% of the respondents stated that they needed to shift left more, and 53% of respondents stated that they needed to shift right more. Our session today is going to focus on the Microfocus point of view, that we need to shift everywhere, both left and right, but not abandon the lessons that we've learned so far in testing. So really gone are the days of being able to toss the application over the fence to QA once you finish coding. The speed of business is just too fast to allow for the delays introduced through feedback being sent days or weeks after the developer finished the code. The human mind has such a challenge context switching from what is currently in the forefront to what was being worked on that long ago. That delay is further compounded by having to ramp back up on what the developer did prior to the commit. We in IT have provided a solution to this, and that's delivering software through a DevOps pipeline. So, Chris, I know we talked a little bit about this before. What's your experience? You know, do you remember the tossing it over the fence to QA, and what was your experience with that?
Oh, I absolutely remember that. You know, I mean, there's really a lot of factors that fit into that, and a couple of things are, you know, when it's just tossed over, you know, you're kind of sitting there like at the starting block ready to start a race, but you have absolutely no idea when it's about to start. And then the worst part is you don't even know how long the race is going to be. You know, you get really two big problems there. One, you have this nearly insurmountable amount of work that's tossed at you at once. And you have to, I mean, you do have an ample opportunity ahead of time to make a game plan, to prepare, to prioritize, figure out what you want to do, what are your prerequisites to do the thing, but it's just a behemoth. The other thing too that unfortunately can happen if you have to wait for this whole deal to be finished is eventually you're going to have your timeline chunk and chunk, you know, because what almost never changes is the release date. What unfortunately I promise I'm not trying to sound like a crybaby. What does change is the amount of time you have to test. But if we can be working together, and if we have the opportunity, stand around that campfire and to be collaborating and sharing and continually working on things, you are perpetually caught up. If I were to tell you tomorrow morning, it fits in perfectly. Tomorrow morning, I want you to cook me the entire Thanksgiving feast. I'll go, holy smokes. But if you were to tell me next Thursday, of course, we're going to have Thanksgiving feast. You have time to prepare. You have time to iterate. You have time to do things that you can prepare and throw together. People do sides ahead of time. People do pies ahead of time. You don't make a pie 2 hours before dinner. That's nuts. So you definitely want to be able to have that opportunity. And, a lot of times too, you have communication breakdowns with this tossing over the wall. You're like, wait, I thought the requirements said this. Well, in the 3 months of development, we changed like 10 things and here they are. Well, what do you mean you changed them? Why couldn't we have been part of it? And that open collaboration is something that unfortunately gets missed with this toss over the wall thing. And there probably are individuals out there that are going, yeah, I still have some apps like that. Guess what? We have a couple of them like that too. Gone are not entirely the days, but gone are the days that is the sole practice you have. Hopefully everybody is experiencing small breaths of fresh air, saying that these things are behind us, that we're able to iterate more, that we're able to continuously test, that we're able to be involved from the beginning. And I think that's a lot of what this is giving us the opportunity to do.
Yep. So we talked about a DevOps pipeline, but I think it's real good to set the stage of what is a DevOps pipeline. So a DevOps pipeline can be visualized through this graphic that we have on here, a water pipeline. There are gates represented by the valves at the different points. That could be quality gates. And if a failure occurs, represented by the production feedback at the bottom, feedback is sent back to the submitter, which is usually the developer, immediately. And that reduces the likelihood of that context switching delays that we talked about earlier. The submitter then resolves the failure, then resubmits into the pipeline. When the submission occurs, it should be stored in a source code repository. That source code repository should version the changes, including submitter comments, provide collision detection, which is a collision would be if multiple changes against the same source need to be integrated from multiple submitters, and merging capabilities to handle those collisions so that you can merge those changes together. Once the source has no collisions, the build system should take over and start executing the pipeline steps. This is called continuous integration. The first step of the build that the build system is going to fire off would be to compile the source to create artifacts, like, for example, for Java code, maybe creating a jar file or a war file if it's a server side, and then to store those artifacts in the artifact repository. Once the artifacts are copied to the artifact repository, which provides a central location for all the artifacts, the build system then executes unit tests using the testing systems. This is the first step of continuous testing. Assuming that the unit test passes, the build system then engages the provisioning and deployment solutions to stand up the next pre-production environment, then deploy the artifacts to that environment. That's called continuous delivery. Once the environment is up and running, the new artifacts, the testing system then executes the appropriate automated tests for that environment, another part of continuous testing. The build system then has the provisioning system deprovision the environment. The last three steps are repeated for each environment or type of testing that needs to be done. That could be integration testing, system testing, performance testing, and on and on. Once all of the testing is completed successfully, the build system has the deployment system move the artifacts into production, including any steps necessary to have the application start to leverage those new artifacts. Those could be things like JVM restarts, or full system restarts, or just a cache cleanup, or other tasks that will make it so that the system can now use that new artifact. This is actually called continuous deployment. As part of the deployment, the operations and monitoring artifacts, which are scripts, configurations, alerts, and other things like that, are deployed and activated. Now, those should have been included in the lower environments as well, and this is called continuous monitoring. So now that we've set the stage for what is a DevOps pipeline, let's drill into testing, which is what we're here to talk about. So we talked about earlier about the reason why we can't just throw stuff over the fence to QA, and Chris gave some great examples of some of the challenges that we have in that. But that doesn't mean that the QA persona is no longer needed. The QA person provides a critical and different way of thinking of how to test a solution. The QA persona has a destructive mindset. They're the resource who will come up with and execute, hopefully automated, the majority of the negative test scenarios for the artifact. A good example might be a quantity field on a shopping application. Positive test, which should be handled in unit testing, would be to test the boundaries of the field. So let's say it's a 2-digit field. The data scenarios covered by the positive test would be the lowest, which would be 1, and the highest, which is 99, and some random value in the middle. This would satisfy the unit test. The QA person, though, would come up with the negative testing scenarios, and those negative testing scenarios could be things like from a data perspective, trying to test it with 0 or -1, or pasting in 99 billion, or pasting in a pound sign or a Cyrillic symbol or an emoji or some other character that might be stored in a buffer in your buffer that somebody might accidentally paste in there to see how the system reacts. While QA provides this necessary and valuable insight, there are definite limitations, though, to what QA can do. Normally, QA is doing what's called black box testing, meaning that they have no visibility into the inner workings of the artifact, and thus they can't ensure proper code coverage. Furthermore, QA is typically engaged, as we discussed earlier, later in the cycle, increasing the time for failure feedback. This is why we need to include the dev tester, or the software development engineer and test, or developer, into the testing. The dev tester should be focused on unit level testing. And because they are the ones typically writing the code, they'll also be doing what's called white box testing, meaning that they can validate the inner workings of the artifact, all of the different logic permutations that the code has inside of it. They also have immediate feedback, so there's no delay or context switching problems like what we talked about earlier. This graphic helps visualize the way shift left and shift right are viewed, with the developer testing being as far left as possible. You could also visualize why it's called shift left by thinking about the positioning of the activities on a Gantt chart in project management, with the development activities happening much earlier or left in the Gantt chart. While the developer understands the code and can ensure adequate code coverage and gets the fastest feedback by creating and executing tests themselves, neither development nor QA has intimate knowledge of how to run the business utilizing the artifact. This is why it's crucial for you to also shift right your testing by engaging the business analysts or the domain experts in the testing, and them contributing to the test automation as well. This persona are people who understand the business processes, why the artifact is being built or modified, and how the artifact will be leveraged to run your business. They also know the flow of the business and understand why it's critical to keeping the business going and what workflow will be executed through the solution, utilizing that artifact in question here. This persona typically, though, doesn't know how to code and can even be scared off from doing work if shown code. It's critical, though, that their contribution towards automation doesn't require coding skills, yet that work, that contribution can still be automated. When you think of this persona, you can think of it like a banker at a bank. They have little to no technical knowledge, but the contribution of their business knowledge into the test automation is crucial to getting to close to zero defect slippage as possible. We at Microfocus provide solutions for all three of these personas, which is kind of unique in our industry that we cater to all three personas. For functional test automation, for the QA persona, we provide a solution called UFT1, which you can see a picture here. This solution is infused with our AI model, providing computer vision and OCR or optical character recognition capabilities to the QA persona, enabling faster scripting and more resilient tests than properties-based scripting. Essentially, computer vision identifies the objects on the screen the same way that a human does, by their visual characteristics. This screenshot that you see here shows the AI inspection window where the computer vision has identified multiple objects and text blocks on the screen that can be acted against. So if you think about how somebody recognizes something on the screen, I like to use the example of a shopping cart. The shopping cart icon, if you were asked to test an application that was a shopping application and you saw a test step that said, click on the shopping cart icon, I wouldn't have to explain to you what the shopping cart icon looks like. You already have the neural synapses built into your neural network that lets you know what a shopping cart icon looks like. And those visual characteristics might be, well, it kind of looks like a half of a hexagon, and it's got a little line underneath it to represent the shelf underneath the basket. And it might have two dots underneath that representing the wheels, and it might have a squiggly line to the side that represents the handle, or any one of those. The basket itself might have hashes in it to show the basket weaving. It might not. It might be solid. It could be light mode, dark mode. It wouldn't matter to you as a human because your neural network's already got that information in there. You can recognize things by their visual characteristics. So for the developer, we provide what's called UFT Developer. UFT Developer is also infused with the AI model, which is a recent addition to UFT Developer. But the solution is delivered via libraries in the developer's IDE, or integrated development environment. In this case, I'm displaying IntelliJ, which is my personal preferred IDE. But since they're libraries, they could be imported and leveraged in any IDE that supports Java, JavaScript, or C#. If you're using Visual Studio, Eclipse, IntelliJ, the Spring Tool Suite, JBoss Developer Studio, Code Ready Developer Studio, or Android Studio, you also get the benefit of the UFT Developer menu item, which is at the top of the screen. You probably can't see it real well, but it is up there. And there are associated wizards to help the developers be even more efficient in their test creation and maintenance. UFT Developer also includes a local version of service virtualization at no additional cost for the developers to leverage, enabling them to test their artifact or artifacts when other components of the solution set aren't available. So if you think of a large program, you might be working on the central instance of an SAP implementation, but the pricing engine isn't ready yet. Well, you could virtualize that pricing engine and test all of your code and have the virtualized pricing engine work to spec. For the business analysts, we provide a product called Codeless, which is in technical preview and currently comes with UFT One. As you can see, the quote-unquote script is in near plain English. No business analyst should be scared of a step that says, click the profile, or click the speaker's text, or type a value into the username field. This is also leveraging that same AI model and can fall back to properties-based. So Chris, I know you partnered with us as a development partner for the AI engine. You were one of the early adopters. What's your experience with leveraging AI, and what's your feeling about how it's revolutionized what you do?
No, absolutely. We've been involved with the AI capabilities since they came out. We've been using them in specifically our project with mobile for well over a year and a half now, with an immense amount of growth and coverage. And there's a lot of really great benefits that come from it, and it actually kind of fits into this picture as well as to the whole pipeline component. So one very important piece of the pipeline is, if you kind of look at it and read into that pipeline, it's that you're best suited when your code and your tests come together. Because as your code gets built, if it doesn't have unit tests or it doesn't have functional tests to it, then how do you know that it's functioning in a way that it ought to be promoted? So with that comes the implicit, well, your code and your development need to come together. Well, how many times have any of us, any of these personas that are listed here, had a case where, well, I can't really do the testing, I can't really do that scripting until the thing's done, because a developer might be continually changing it, or a designer might come up with a change that's going to alter the layout, and maybe it's going to change from a button to a div to a thingamabob that looks like a button but is neither the two things. And that's a common thing. It's like, well, I can script it a little bit, but it's not until I'm done that I can actually do it. So then you've made it so you can't do what we're trying to say here to be able to shift. Well, the really great thing that the AI engine has given us is, I think it's important to take a teeny step back and revisit something you had said, Don, is we're talking about, when you talked about that shopping cart, you weren't talking about a graphics file. You weren't talking about vector graphics rendered in a particular way. You were talking more specifically, hey, look, he's got a slide for that. He was talking more specifically about the way in which it's actually physically rendered. This allows us to, with knowing and understanding what's going to be present, to start writing without it. You can do, and I don't know if you would consider it TDD, test-driven development. We take it as an automation first approach where we can, if you know the way the screens are going to be rendered, if you understand the flow that's going to be there, we can do the automation without really needing the screen. We might have 10, 15% modifications needed if something changed that we weren't aware of, but we can do it ahead of time. This is huge for us because then we can get closer and meet the objective of having the code and the automation ready together. If not, developer basically be sitting going, I'm done, why aren't you done yet? I don't know, you can give it to me yet. Can't automate what I don't have. We can automate what we don't have with the understanding of what's going to be visually presented. It's very key to understand that there does require an interface for this, and at the time of UFT1 today and UFT developer and the UFT family, it is only applicable for mobile and web, unless of course you're going to tell me something different on. Those are a large majority of our applications. You think back to that dev tester, in the same way that as a QA engineer, I'm not necessarily expected to be a development wizard. Obviously, I need to know some development for it, but I don't need to fit into the role of the developer. Why should I be asking that developer to fit in the role of what I do and understand intimates about doing UI automation? Allowing tooling like AI to be offered up to the developer allows them to say, I don't necessarily need to know how to interact with this icon. I don't necessarily need to know how to interact with this form field. I can just interact with it because it's a form field. That AI engine understands what are form fields. It understands what are buttons. It understands what are drop downs, radial buttons. I could go on, go to ADM help and find the full list for yourself and see all the powers that it can be, but it understands those things that I interact with. Another really phenomenal thing, and I'm probably going outside of the scope of what we're talking about, is there's many times that it's going to say, make sure the graphic that says, well, in our case, independent health is there. Wait, I can't read a graphic. In the days of past, I might have to do some really horrible bitmap stuff, which had a very low accuracy rating, or I might have had to do something even worse and say, well, if the file name is independent health logo.png, it must be right. Let's hope it is,
Yep.
But now we can actually, using the OCR component of it, and the computer vision, we can actually read that. So when you're looking at the interface, it doesn't matter if it's an image. No, folks, this is not going to help you pass those little CAPTCHA things. Put that aside for a moment. I've had that asked way too many times. And it's not supposed to. CAPTCHA's there for a reason. It'll help you read images that contain text. If the button is submit, but it's not text, it says submit on it, you can do those things. So it takes away an immense amount of the pain and suffering that comes with automating a UI. I probably rambled more than I thought, but this really helps all the personas. It helps take away the pain and suffering of the automation engineer. It helps lower the cost of entry of the individual that's in the dev phase to do it. And it helps take away potentially fear and anxiety of doing anything automated related for that business persona. And it allows them to focus on what are they good at. The business persona is really great at understanding the business, taking some SOPs and other things and working them through. The individual doing automation is great at what they do. They come up with the cases, they exercise the cases, they data drive them, they do all those phenomenal things, take away some of those woes. And again, to do almost like a UI level unit test, those developers have the ability to do things there. It just makes it simpler And a hidden benefit is now all three of these personas have a common language that they can speak and understand and share together.
Yeah, and one of the things too, Chris, that I liked what you talked about is in a previous conversation was you're getting you're changing how you test. You're testing the visual aspect of the application instead of the underlying DOM objects.
That's
Did
a
you want
great
to talk
point.
about that again?
Yeah, actually, it was funny because in my head, I was going through all the other presentations and people I've talked to about this AI stuff. I'm like, I got to say something different. But you're right, that is an important thing to talk about. And it's taking that whole think different approach about what you're doing for automation. You're no longer interacting with the objects that are in the back end. You're now front facing as a user using the real user interface. A totally preposterous example, but it's totally possible to happen, is you can have white text on a white page. Does it exist? Well, to the normal human being, unless you're Spidey-Man with spider sense, you're not going to know there's text on the page. It's not rendered. It's not visually rendered. Will an HTML DOM have it? Can old school traditional automation find it? Yep. Is it valid? No, it's not. The user experience is not there. We're able to both put ourselves in the shoes of the user and test more user-like, and also start inadvertently and for no cost whatsoever to us, throwing in various levels of UX testing. We are dealing with the real deal rendered user interface here. It's great. When you're talking about mobile stuff, I don't need to see the mobile device up. I don't need the device. UFT, in our case, is talking to UFT Mobile and saying, hey, I was asked to do this thing, give me the screen, and I'm going to find whatever it is I'm looking for, the login button, the thing that says claims, the thing that says copay amount, and it's going to interact with it in that way. It's pretty darn cool.
Thanks, Chris, for walking through the slide too for me. So, so I talked about the AI model, right? So we have the AI model actually abstracted out with the computer vision, the neural network, how to interact and manipulate objects naturally. So Chris talked about that, you know, like a search button. You find the magnifying glass, which by the way, kind of looks like a capital Q. You click on it, you type in a value, you hit enter, or you click on the magnifying glass again, and it runs a search. So that's what's in the neural network, is how to interact with that. And natural language processing, or NLP, that's what we showed you in Codeless, which is the near plain English. But what about performance? So just like the functional test automation space, we also cater to all three personas in the performance testing space. For QA or performance engineers, we provide LoadRunner Professional for small project-based initiatives. When the initiative is larger or enterprise-wide, we provide a solution called LoadRunner Enterprise, which extends the LoadRunner Professional capabilities by including asset sharing and trend reporting. The asset sharing allows you to share lab resources, for example, load generators, controllers, the licenses themselves, and schedule and reserve them. Trend reporting provides a mechanism to analyze not just the current run, but how that run compares to previous runs, to provide the larger picture of whether overall performance is improving or degrading from run to run. We also provide LoadRunner Cloud, where our SaaS provides, or software as a service team, provides all the necessary infrastructure for executing the tests at runtime in our cloud. Both LoadRunner Professional and LoadRunner Enterprise can also cloud burst out to LoadRunner Cloud for additional spike performance tests. For the developer, we have a relatively new solution called LoadRunner Developer. It's free. Pause for dramatic effect. Yes, I use the word free. And you can run up to 50 virtual users with the developer within the developer's IDE. Now, frankly, if you get greater than 50 virtual users in a developer's IDE, chances are the laptop or the machine that the developer is using isn't going to be able to handle that anyways, because of the load on the device itself. However,
and frankly, wouldn't you agree, Don, that if a developer feels they have to do that, let's give that developer a break and say that's probably way out of scope for them anyways, and it really ought to be covered by someone else. I mean, there's a reason that you're giving 50 for free and saying, hey, development team, we're going to allow you to use the same tools that your engineers use. We're going to give them to you for free. We're going to give them to you in your IDE. We're going to make life easier for you. But frankly, that 50 kind of comes with a, by the way, that's probably what you need. Don't do something you shouldn't be doing. Allow yourself to focus on your own job.
Yep. In some cases, and in some cases though, where you go completely decentralized, where you have the team everyone is a developer on the Scrum team. We also provide the ability from within UFT developer that you can cloud burst out to load runner cloud as well, so that you can do a much larger test straight from the IDE as well. Additionally, since they all co-reside in the IDE, you can leverage the service virtualization capabilities during the execution as well, so you can enable performance and load testing even when other parts of the solution aren't available. As you can see from the screenshot, we also leverage a Grafana analysis dashboard during the run as well, which is included with Load Runner Developer. For the business analyst, we have a protocol called TrueClient that allows a business persona to contribute to performance testing as well. As you can see, the script is displayed again in near plain English and allows most business analysts to create scripts that are 80 to 95% complete. Then they deliver those scripts for final polish to the QA or performance engineering persona. The point here, though, is everyone should be contributing to performance for performance testing as well. Now let's drill back out and look at the DevOps pipeline that we showed earlier. You've probably read multiple articles about DevOps from multiple sources, including large consulting firms. Most of these articles extols the virtue of open source and suggest that you should definitely leverage open source platforms since they're quote unquote free. Each box has multiple solutions that are viewed as open source. Now I recognize that ADO, for example, Azure DevOps is not truly free, but depending on your agreement with Microsoft, you may be getting that bundled in with all of your other Microsoft licenses. So it's free to you. The challenge that's being faced in the industry, though, is that free is only talking about the licensing costs, not the total cost of ownership. These free solutions frequently require significant human labor investment in order to successfully accomplish the task or tasks that the tool is being asked to do. So if we take Selenium, for example, which I know, Chris, you're a Selenium, I'd call you a Selenium guru. Maybe you wouldn't call yourself that. But Selenium requires detailed coding knowledge and intimate understanding of the object properties within the DOM, or the document object model of your application. And it only works with web, and its locators often end up relying on the CSS or the XPath. Well, many technologies will cause the CSS and or the XPath to change with each build of the artifact, causing very brittle test automation scripts. Furthermore, the scripts are so technical that they're difficult to read and really only cater to one of the three personas that we've talked about. As with all open source solutions, when, not if, but when you run into a problem, you have to rely on the open source community for a resolution. If the problem is unique to your environment, you're on your own to figure out how to resolve the problem. If the community hasn't encountered your technology before, you're also on your own. When you deal with a COTS or a commercial off-the-shelf solution like Microfocus solutions, you're backed not only by a robust user community like you are with open source, but also a support and R&D, or research and development organization, who can help when you face a challenge and provide a much faster mean time to resolution and give you deeper and broader technology support. As with the case of Selenium, since you're limiting the personas that can contribute to automation, you're also exposing yourself to the increased risk of defect slippage because you haven't accounted for those other personas we talked about earlier and their thorough process knowledge or business knowledge. Let's assume that you've done all the necessary human labor investment and your pipeline is running smoothly and effectively and efficiently, utilizing all these open source tools. How do you make informed decisions about what's going on within the pipeline? We at Microfocus, we provide solutions for each of these phases of the DevOps pipeline. While we wouldn't be opposed to a rip and replace approach for your pipeline tools, we focus on plugging the gaps in your pipeline as they exist today, while augmenting the return on your investment when you don't have gaps. For example, if you tell us you already have a team of Jenkins experts who have already built and are maintaining Jenkins jobs and pipelines as the build system, that's great. Continue to do so, and we can plug Jenkins into Octane to increase the value. Maybe you need to plug the Git repository gap because you're a regulated environment, because Git allows developers to overwrite previous developers' comments without history. We could lay Pulse Uno on top of Git to provide that immutable history while preserving the current way of working. Or maybe you aren't performing static code analysis, and we can help plug that gap with Fortify. Or maybe you're using your build system to also do deployment with lots of scripting, which requires lots of maintenance. We could help you by digitizing those scripts with deployment automation and stop forcing your build system to do something it wasn't purpose-built to do. So I mentioned Fortify, and I talked a little bit about security. One thing that you'll notice when you attend any of my sessions or any conversations with me, I always call it DevOps. I don't call it DevSecOps. I don't call it SecDevOps. Why is that? Because I'm a firm believer that security needs to be built into your DevOps pipeline. It just needs to be a native part of your DevOps pipeline. Of course you do static code analysis, security scans, every single time you run your build to build out your application. Of course you do. Why? Because you don't want to be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal and be the one whose company caused the company to go out of business because of a massive security breach. There's still a challenge, though, that we need to address. There's actually a fourth persona that we haven't talked about yet. And that persona is leadership and management. They need to be able to make informed investment and strategic decisions based on the information in the entire pipeline across all the different tooling that you have. You're not going to have a director or a vice president scraping through Jenkins logs trying to determine what's going on within the pipeline. That's where ALM Octane comes in. ALM Octane gathers the information from across all of your DevOps pipeline tools, whether they're Microfocus, open source, or third party, and provides reporting and dashboarding so that your leadership can make insight-driven business decisions, driving your DevOps pipeline to the achievement of its goals, which is delivering software at the speed of business, but with quality. So with that concludes the actual prepared presentation portion of it. I've included here a hyperlink to an ebook about integrating open source and COTS systems, and also the QR code here, which will take you out there as well if you want to use your phone to snap a picture of the QR code and go out and get the free ebook. Chris, did you have any other comments that you wanted to make, maybe about the DevOps pipeline itself, or ALM Octane, or some of the other capabilities that we talked about plugging gaps?
Well, I can definitely say I can echo your statements on open source being free to obtain the software, not necessarily low cost of ownership nor easy entry. And I think everybody kind of gets that. And I certainly can respect and understand that certain individuals say, well, our two choices are do nothing because we have no budget, or do something with what we can obtain. And I think what's really cool that I've seen is Microfocus has evolved over the years, especially in the ADM space, is the ability to integrate with lots of things. The ability to integrate with different source code, the ability to integrate with build systems. You know, some of the build systems listed there, I know it works with most, but I've only had an opportunity to work with ADO and with Jenkins. You know, I can integrate all my test automation into those with a simple to use plugin. You know, if I want to do that. So if my development team says we are going to use X and that's what we're going to use and that's what our pipeline is, come join the party, I'll say sure. You know, there's the opportunity to interact with lots of things. So, you know, where you may not have the budget to go all in, or you may not want to, there may be reasons that you've chosen each individual piece in here because it's something that's more appropriate for your environment, something that you love more, something that's pre-existing and it's there already. You know, there's certainly opportunity to do so. The personal space that I come from is that testing realm and a bit of the ALM Octane world. and certainly recognizing how it fits in. I mean, certainly I'm really looking forward to the future where, going back to the AI bit, where there's a language that all the different levels can speak to, that they can interact with. You know, we're giving this engine that gives the ability to easy interact with the interfaces, easy to make decisions, lower maintenance cost, and more reliability to all of those personas, and have them, you know, leverage that. And the neat thing is as those models continue to grow, as the technology continues to get better, and as we're delivered that, everything just keeps getting easier and easier and easier and easier to work with. I would kind of like to touch upon some of the themes that we saw in the registration questions, if we can, and just have a little open dialogue about that, Don.
Absolutely.
And while we do that, I certainly want to invite everyone to go into the questions and drop questions in. There is one, and I'm going to start with that before we get into the themes, and that's curiosity of if there's a way to migrate UFT1 tests to Codeless. I think I'd like to hand that to you, Don, but I think I'd probably like to, actually I'll let you start, Don, and then maybe I'll follow up on that. So, you know, is there any way, if someone's like, wow, this Codeless thing looks amazing, is there a way for me to migrate from something and I have in UFT1 to Codeless?
So there's not. To be honest, it's the first time that I've had the question asked. So I've never even really honestly thought about how I might want to do that. So I'm happy to dig into that some more, give it some offline thought, talk to some of our product guys to talk about, you know, if that's something that's on our roadmap or not. Currently, no.
I can offer up two things from my perspective, if all right. Sure. One is the reminder for anyone who hasn't had the ability to use AI. If you use 15 or 2 or higher, it's baked in. If you use 15 or 1501, which frankly I would encourage you to go 1502 or higher, there's the ability to have it's a transformation assistant report.
Yes.
What's the new title for it? But basically what it does, it says, here's your existing UFT test. Instead of giving you normal reports, I'm going to give you this special cool new report that's going to tell you, as the test was running, the AI engine was running and looking at each object you said, like a login button, a field, or whatever, and it's going to, in the report, instead say, hey, you used to use this object. Maybe it was a descriptive object, maybe it was something that lived in an object repository or similar, and it's going to instead say, here's what the AI object is. And it's a transformation assistant to assist you from going from a traditional automated script from UFT1 that would either leverage, you know, descriptive or the object repository, and help really jump you into the land of AI in the realm. That's certainly one thing that's there. Personally, for me, I truthfully feel there's different persona purposes for these tools for a reason. If you're doing more happy path driven, more straight purpose, not a lot of variation in it, Codeless is the way to go. If you're going to do variability into it, a lot of dynamic data and things like that, honestly, I still think it's important to leverage something like UFT1 because you have a bit more control there. And it's a tool that's more appropriate for you. So to Thomas, who asked this question, I would ask back, you know, think about the shoes that you're looking to fill. What are you trying to do with it? And that might help you determine the tool. You know, that's my take on it.
Yeah, the transformation assistant actually, if you're if you're on 15 or 1501, there's actually a version of it that you can download and activate from the marketplace as well. With 1502, it was actually started to be baked into the tool, and obviously it's in 2021 as well.
Yeah, I think the reason I encourage people to jump up to at least 1502 is there's sufficient additions to the model, and there's been a bunch of performance enhancements dropped into the AI engine that it's just that much more worth it. If you're going to go AI, consider at least 1502. Honestly, the UFT 2021 edition has an immense amount of benefits to it from the perspective of speed and efficiencies of the AI engine. But I think that kind of definitely will be monitoring questions that come in. Takes to some of the questions that came in originally. You know, we had well over 50 questions that came in. I've summarized them down to trends And let's try to do a lightning round, like a minute or so on each one of these.
So Chris, if we can talk about the speed thing real quick. I don't know if that was one of the topics.
The first one.
That's the first one. Great. So speed actually talks about maturity of an AI engine itself. So one of the things that you'll find is there's a lot of talk in the marketplace from some of our competitors about their AI capabilities. The best competitor out there is about 1.5 years behind us, which is like 3 generations of the AI engine itself. And each generation, it becomes smarter, faster, and more capable. If you look at the speed of executing the exact same script on UF2 2021 versus 1453 when it was first introduced in a tech preview, it's a night and day performance difference from that. The other part of that too is I want to make sure people understand the AI capabilities is very GPU dependent. If you're using VMware, for example, VMware Workstation Pro, VMware does not allow you to allocate GPU to the virtual machine. So you're not able to take advantage of the GPU. If you have a very high GPU machine that you're using for maybe in the Amazon farms, or that you have a physical machine that has a lot of a high GPU, the performance increase, the performance hit that you take for utilizing AI becomes nearly non-noticeable. So I want to make sure people understand that GPU is very important when it comes to computer vision.
And let's throw this whole, so I know, Don, you talk a lot about version currency and making sure that you're up to speed on the latest version of the product for very specific reasons. With the 2021 edition that came out, what, month and a half ago, something like that, came a brand new feature. I personally have not had a chance to try it out yet, just because it's on my laundry list of things to do, of something really nifty, and that's an AI server. And what that gives you the capability to do is have a dedicated box that says, I, as this AI server, will make your AI decisions for you, meaning you don't have to have the taxing GPU, CPU, memory, etc., or the processes running on your each individual VMs, desktops, wherever your UFT1 is running. So you can say, oh gosh, GPU is expensive. You can say, well, let's invest in a GPU box. And you can say, have all my AI decisions go there. You know, that in itself is an X factor to performance. A second thing that came with 2021 is caching. You know, so if you do a very robust test and you say, well, I need to click on this thing, and because I want to error handle it or make a decision if it's not there, I'm going to check for it first, and then I'm going to click on it. Well, now you're talking about 2 hits to that object minimum. Well, why should I rescan the thing twice when it was just there? It didn't change. So there's the notion of caching that was also introduced, and we've experimented with caching, and it's been great because one, you add extra reliability. Secondly, you're adding speed. Why am I checking for it twice? I looked to see if it was there to be able to make a decision, and it was there. Why are you checking again? You're not checking again. There's a lot that was added into there for sure.
There's a third performance enhancement too. If you think about a large form that you have to fill out on a screen where you're interacting with multiple objects on the screen, you can actually interact with the first object and do a freeze on the, I think it's called freeze. Sorry if I use the wrong term, but you essentially can freeze the AI scanning so that it doesn't rescan the page for all the other objects that are visible on the screen. It uses that first scan, even though you're interacting with different objects, so you don't have to rescan the page, and then you can unfreeze it once you submit or you scroll the page or whatever the case may be.
No, for sure, because as you're doing a scan, you know, it's certainly looking at a multitude of things on the screen. So again, why would you want it to do it twice? You know, there are some tips and tools and tuning that you can do to make your stuff better for sure. And I think while we're on this topic, I think, so that was speed of execution, also comes speed of scripting. You know, hopefully it's evident that by not having to carefully craft locators, and then also giving the capability for individuals who aren't as accustomed to looking at the DOM to figure out locators and whatnot, deal with object repositories, to give them this tool that lowers that cost, that in itself is helping to reduce the speed of scripting, making it so that no, increase this, whatever. It's making it so that we can script a lot faster. You know, that's another thing that this is allowing it to do. And I'll be first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's another aspect to your scripting speed as well, and that has to do with maintenance. Think about it. You know, you think about. Sorry, I didn't mean to get ahead of you there. So you think about the amount of time that you spend maintaining scripts, and how much time do you spend inside the object repository itself, dealing with changes to the object within the DOM, or refining what you're doing with regular expressions, or whatever the case may be that you spend in there. What if you didn't have an object repository to even go in and manage? There are scripts that I've done where I just don't have them anymore. I use the transformation assistant. I had a properties-based shopping cart script that was SAP Fiori that I converted to be 100% AI, and I was able to completely remove the object repository. Well, now if that object changes, it gets rebuilt. One of the properties that I was relying on changes or fatally gets removed by SAP. It doesn't care. It doesn't break. Not only is it faster to maintain, I eliminated the maintenance that I had to do because of the object change. Much better to not have to go in and actually maintain it than to speed up how quickly you do the maintenance.
Yep. Yeah, and frankly, not having something that's binary proprietary to store your objects into and have something that's more legible is great. And again, I can't speak well enough of how great it is to have something that all the personas can speak to at the same level. I mean, the majority of our mobile tests have one object in the repository. Well, maybe a pair, the app and the device, just because for us, with having to deal with the app names and stuff like this, it's a little bit easier to have an object. That's literally it. There's nothing else in there. Everything else is driven by the AI. And in some of our tests have been written before we even got the app because we knew what was going to be there. So yeah, that really talks about, oh, go ahead.
Well, you talk about the object repository and being able to slim it down or eliminate it. We have customers that would make these large shared object repositories for entire applications or suite of applications, to where the object repository became so big that it caused performance issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's another hidden benefit that because I was able to eliminate those objects that I needed to manage in the object repository, that performance hit goes away as well.
Yep, and I think that brings up two important things, and it all surrounds abstraction and using shared code. So the very first time I was shown AI, I said, well, I'm not sure I want to rely on this other thing that I don't have control over to do my stuff. And then we were handed a mobile project. And I said, whoa, I might change my idea on that, because dealing with dual scripts for iOS and Android could be really horrific. And then we started kicking the tires on it to see how it goes. When you start to realize that what AI brings you is a level of abstraction. Could anybody else write it? Probably not as good. You can write it if you want to invest decades of time into it, but why not use what you're being provided that comes at cost with your UFT product? It's a layer of abstraction. Much like it's a layer of abstraction, I highly encourage as a test automation architect to add abstraction to your stuff. If you're going to do reusable login things, don't rewrite it a bunch of times, so that if your process does change, even though it's human readable, even though it's very natural language like, it's still maintenance. Don't use one benefit to create a deficit. Certainly I encourage, as you're using it, do abstraction. Have a function library of helpers that have things like login and menu selection and whatever things you do that are reusable throughout your stuff. Having a function that does AI bits that's pulled into your test is absolutely beneficial. In my opinion, highly encouraged. So, the coupling of the two together, introducing some good practices and standards, or realizing that just because it's AI doesn't mean you need to ditch the practices you have, you can replace them. I mean, let's think for 1 minute, if you had two highly changeable things. Let's say your company changed its login screen every quarter. Well, if all I did was take and inject AI into the login script, now every single script that does login, which is probably all of them or near all of them, has a very positive influence of having an incredibly low cost of maintenance to them and very high reliability because it's interacting with that interface. And now couple in, all the advancements that have come with AI that we've been provided through updates, you get execution speed added into there as well. So it's like I can't remember how many different points I made, but let's call it a quadruple win in that regard.
Well, hey, Chris, we've hit the top of the hour. I know time flew by fast. At least it did from my perspective. I always enjoy having the conversations with you, Chris.
Absolutely.
I want to say thank you for everyone for participating, for the questions that you sent. If you have questions that you didn't get a chance to send, please feel free to reach out to myself directly, don.jackson@microfocus.com, or you can reach out to your Microfocus representative, and we'll be happy to assist you. If you want to see the AI stuff in action, happy to come in and do a demo for you. Have your local pre-sales rep come in and do that demo for you, where we can show you creating automation off of Paint created screenshots. So somebody drew it in Paint and then actually run it against a live system. So this event's been recorded, so you should get a link within the next few days. And when you leave the webinar, please fill out the brief survey that'll pop up so that you get registered for the Coffee on Us gift card, and make sure that you include a business email in that. With that, we want to say thank you again from a Vivit perspective, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
And have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.